All right, we'll continue reading from Voyagers 2. I guess this is chapter 2 that we're on now. It says the second seeding, Sirius B, and the third eye of Horus 4 million years ago. In an attempt to revitalize the human evolutionary program on behalf of the Urturates, who had sacrificed their freedom 550 million years ago to rescue the lost souls of Terra through the Tura Nusium 2 experiment. About 4 million years ago, the Syrian Council of Harmonic Universe 2, working with the Elohim and descendants of the Terran Ceres, a Harmonic Universe 2 family known as the Ceres, and several other Harmonic Universe 2 groups, created a plan through which human evolution on Earth could be restarted. Earth's grid could not sustain a life field with fourth-dimensional gene coding, so a plan was devised to allow the souls waiting within the sphere of Amente in Dimension 4 to be re-entered into Earth by a process called downgrading. Through this process, the vibrational essence of the race morphogenetic field could be stepped down to a lower vibrational pattern by passing a portion of the morphogenetic field through the core of the planet in Harmonic Universe 1. This experiment would require the use of a planetary body within the same time spiral cycles as Earth, which had a core vibrational speed particle pulsation rate slightly higher than that of Earth. The planet chosen for this experiment in your Sirius star system is known as Sirius B. An artificial portal bridge was constructed between the core of Sirius B, the sphere of Amente in Dimension 4, and the Earth core at Dimension 2. A small portion of the Amente morphogenetic field was placed within the core of Sirius B, the part that contained the energy essence souls of the second seeding. Some of these soul essences combined their consciousness with the evolving etheric consciousness of Sirius B and created a hybrid strain of Syrian human consciousness, which came to be known as the Kentarians. This name was derived from the Kuntures, the non-physical Syrian subrace of consciousness with which the human consciousness had merged. The Kentarians became semi-dense physical beings upon merging with the morphogenetic field of the humans from the second seeding. Much later, the Kentarians founded the Kentarian Federation, gaining approval from the Harmonic Universe 1 Galactic Federation to serve as a guardian and educator race for the humans of the second and third seedings, and they became heavily involved with old Sumerian and Egyptian cultures, as well as that of Atlantia and Atlantis. The portal bridge between Sirius B and the sphere of Amente and the Earth allowed for greater evolutionary options for the fourth and fifth races, those who carried the third DNA strand in their race morphogenetic field. This option was not available to Lemanian, Lumerian, and Ur-Antrian cultures, as they did not carry the full third strand imprint in their morphogenetic field. The option assisted Atlantean races and their Brianoa, sorry, that was that weird word again. I think it was Brianoa cloister, who successfully assembled the third strand, and also the Aryan races and their Hyberu cloister, who were not able to fully assemble their fourth DNA strand prior to death. For these races, instead of the soul essence fragmenting into Dimension 2, Dimension 3, and Dimension 4 following death, as would be the case due to the seal of Palador, The soul essence who had assembled most of the third strand could move into the race morphogenetic field in Sirius B. Within the morphogenetic field of Sirius B, the soul could evolve here for a time as disembodied consciousness to assemble more frequencies into its code, then pass into the sphere of Amente through the portal bridge. Souls taking the Sirius B path of evolution could release the seal of Pallador, but not the seal of Amente. They could return to the Palladorian morphogenetic field and wait there for the seeding of the fifth race, into which they would incarnate to assemble the remainder of the fourth strand. This was a much better option than fragmentation, which would create loss of the personal identity imprint as the soul's fragments merged with the consciousness of the fifth races. Individual sentient identity could be retained through evolving through Sirius B. During the second seeding, this portal bridge became known as the Hall of Amoria. In the third seeding, during the time of Atlantis and the Egyptian pharaonic rule, it became known as the Third Eye of Horus, and represented the culmination of the left eye of Horus and the right eye of Horus mystical teachings. The third eye of Horus was a closely guarded secret, and passage through this dimensional bridge was reserved for the few elite races who carried the needed third strand genetic imprint. Okay, well, that's pretty interesting so far. So, most people would always associate like the eye of Horus and stuff with the pineal gland, the third eye. And I guess that's kind of what this is all connected to, according to what I'm reading here, is these portals and all these things are activated by like your DNA and your consciousness, which is all facilitated through your third eye, your pineal gland. All right, let's keep reading. The second seeding, the fourth world. This is 3.7 million years ago through 848,000 years ago. The morphogenetic field for the second seeding races was entered into Sirius B approximately 4 million years ago. The races began incarnating on Earth in a small group of human hybrids who had found exile and evolved within the Harmonic Universe 1 Pleiades star system during the Electric Wars. Through the Syrian Council of Harmonic Universe 2 and the Galactic Federation of Harmonic Universe 1, members of this hybrid race, known as the Europherites, sometimes called the Uris, migrated from Harmonic Universe 1 Pleiadian star systems to Sirius B, interbred with the Cantarian race to strengthen the human and Syrian imprint in their genetic code, forming a smaller hybrid race called the Dagos, or the Dagos. Dagos. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but through the Dagos, Cantarian, and Harmonic Universe 1 Pleiadian lineage became intertwined with the original Turanusium 2 imprint during the second seeding. The Dagos were a dark brown skinned race whose genetic imprint would be carried as a recessive gene within the human strain of the second seeding. The Dagos were brought to Earth to set up small colonies in various locations about 3.995 million years ago. Reseeding of the cloistered and root races of Amente began, starting with the Ur-Antrian cloister 3.7 million years ago, followed by root race 3 million years ago. Root race 3, the Lumerians, became the Lemanians, denoting their passage through Sirius B. The fourth root race and its cloister entered next, the Brianoa cloister, about 3 million years ago, followed by the Elanian root race 4 at 2.5 million years ago. The Elanians became known as the Atlanians. The fifth root race, Aryans and their cloister, Hybiru, then entered the Hybiru 1.5 million and the Aryans 1.275 million years ago. The time period beginning with the second seeding 3.7 million years ago, extended through the third seeding into the present time, represents the fourth world of Native American legends. Melchizedek races. DNA strands and the races, the sixth root race, the Melchizedeks, and Hybiru cloister mix are Gotha and the Essenes, Hebrews and Christians. The fifth root race, Aryans, now known as the Aryans, just spelled differently with a Y, were responsible for assembling the fourth DNA strand, which corresponded to the fourth dimensional frequencies, and through them, the Earth grid would raise in vibrational rate so the sphere of Amente could be returned to the Earth core. As they fulfilled the assembly of the fourth strand, the seal of Pallador would be lifted, allowing the soul fragments from Dimension 2 and Dimension 4 to merge with fifth race consciousness and evolve. And the soul essences of race 3 and 4, who waited within the sphere of Amente to reincarnate into the fifth race, could be set free. The Aryans contained within their DNA strands numbers 1, 2, and 3, and the base codes of 4, their Hybiru cloister containing these, plus the imprint for assembly of strands 7 through 12. Both Aryan and Hybiru races have 2 strands of DNA, double helix. That's what we have, if I'm not mistaken, is the double helix. And it says, manifest within their bodies on Earth, and 2 strands manifest within their antiparticle doubles on parallel Earth. The fourth root race, Elanians, now the Atlanians, had 3-strand DNA, strands 1 and 2, and the base codes for 3, where the Brianoa cloister having these, plus the imprint for the 7th through 12. Elanians and Brianoa would each manifest 1.5 strands within their bodies on Earth and within the parallel system. Root race 3, Lumerians, now Lemanians, had strand 1 and the base codes of strand 2. Their Ur-Antrian cloister had these, plus the imprint for 7 through 12. All of these races of the second seeding carried trace codes of the Pleiadian Syrian Dagos. Races of the second and third seeding, like their ancestors of the first seeding, also carried grounding codes within their operational DNA strands, which contained partial frequency patterns for each of the 12 dimensions within the 12-strand Turanesium imprint. Okay, I guess that's kind of making sense. Kind of a lot of info all at once, but it sounds like they got to merge all these different incarnates with different activation codes in the DNA to eventually bring the turn back on the full 12-strand DNA, which is what we're here evolving through right now. There was a song written about this called 46 and 2 by a rock band called Tool. Okay, let's keep reading. The grounding codes allowed each race to manifest with some degree of 3-dimensional physical matter density, and also for transmutation of the physical matter particles once the overtone activation codes were operational. Though all of the races carried the grounding codes, not all could activate them because of the seal of Amente. As long as the seal of Amente, the missing 6 overtone of the first DNA strand, was contained in their morphogenetic pattern, none of the races could activate the grounding codes of the higher dimensions. as races 3 through 5 of the second and third seeding would be born with the seals of Pallador and Amente, only those whose imprint contained the fourth DNA strand, the fifth and the sixth root races, had the potential to activate all of the grounding codes to ascend. The fifth root race, which was also born with the seal of Amente, held the hope of activating the grounding codes. If they could fully assemble their fourth DNA strand, this would give them astral plane, dimension 4 mobility of consciousness, through which they could pass into their cloister morphogenetic fields on the astral plane and merge with their body double there, through which the seal of Amente would release from strand 1. Then strands 2 and 3 could plug into their doubles and into strand 4. Once strands 1 through 4 plugged into each other, the matter particles would begin to fuse within their antiparticles, which would activate or fire the fifth, sixth, and seventh grounding codes, allowing the body to fully transmute through the blue flame and the hulls of Amente to reappear on Terra. The sixth and seventh root races and their cloisters carried the remaining fifth and sixth DNA strands of the 12-strand package. Neither of these races entered full manifestation during the second and third seedings. The root race are the Muvarians, their cloister the Melchizedeks. They will assemble DNA strand number 5, corresponding to the fifth dimensional frequencies and represent the transitional race cycle through Earth's ascension passage into merger with Terra. The Melchizedeks are a blended race carrying various racial strains. Though they represent the cloister that originally began the yellow-skinned races on Earth, they are not limited to manifesting through this racial line. Melchizedeks appear with strains of all the races as they became involved as a host matrix surrogate morphogenetic field for many of the races towards the end of the second seeding. The Melchizedeks carry DNA strands 1 through 4 and the base codes of 5, plus the imprint for strands 7 through 12. You following this so far? Is this confusing? I was a bit confused at first. It's kind of starting to make more sense now. They are free of the seals of Pallador and Amente, and can thus undergo full transmutation of bodily form in order to ascend. If they are able to fully activate the base tones within their fifth strand because of their advanced genetic package, the Melchizedeks are able to pass through the blue flame in the halls of Amente and experience teleportation through the portals into the Terran environment. So the Melchizedeks are like very key, extremely important in this whole process, from what I'm getting here, because they have the full encoded package in the DNA to do this final ascension process here, to reconnect all 12 of the strands, I guess, from what I'm getting here. It's pretty interesting. Let's keep reading. The Melchizedeks assisted in repairing genetic digression towards the end of the second seeding, becoming one of the host matrix families. Then began their race birthing cycle. The third seeding, the first wave of the Melchizedeks, appeared about 35,000 years ago. The second wave, 3,500 years ago. And the third wave began about 250 years ago and continues today. The family of the Templar Melchizedeks established the Essene Brotherhood and the priesthood of Melchizedek. Okay, because I remember about the Essenes and their ancient teachings and things like that. Okay, it's all just more puzzle pieces coming together, it seems. Let's keep reading. Okay, the Essene Brotherhood and the priesthood of Melchizedek, a priesthood that still exists on Earth today. The lineage of the Essenes was one of the 25 families within the Melchizedek cloister, descendants of the first wave of the Melchizedek cycle. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the Dead Sea Scrolls that were discovered. I think those were written by the Essenes. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's who it was. But that was a very significant archaeological discovery. Okay, let's keep reading. The Melchizedeks assisted in the Hebrew cloister of Root Race 5 in repairing genetic damage at the end of the second seeding. Then during the third seeding, the Templar Melchizedeks once again intervened, creating a mixed cloister race, carrying the genetic codes of both lines, which accelerated the evolutionary potentials of the Hebrew and Aryan races. The mixed cloister breeding would later become a major problem for the descendants of this lineage due to the events that transpired 10,000 years ago during the third seeding. The mixed cloister Hebrew Melchizedek race became known as the Hebrew race during the second and third seedings. The Essenes, Templar Melchizedeks, Hebrew and Christian lineages of the third seeding, including those of the present-day Earth, all carry this genetic advancement. And following the events of 8,000 BC, which is about 10,000 years ago, those affiliated with the Templar Melchizedeks would also carry forth a great genetic burden. The spiritual influence of the Templar Melchizedeks has touched all of the major Christian and Jewish persuasions, and they played an instrumental role in the formation of the modern-day Mormon Christian faith. The Melchizedeks are a primary force within the present times on earth, as they are now within the third wave of their race birthing cycle. The Melchizedeks hold within their lineage the promise of ascension, even more so than do the fifth Aryan and Hebrew races, but not all Melchizedeks presently bear the same genetic coding. Two primary groups of Melchizedeks have evolved out of the original Melchizedek cloister morphogenetic field. The cloistered family of Melchizedek and the Templar Melchizedeks. The difference between their spiritual teachings denote not only a physical preference, but also a genetic propensity that came into being 10,000 years ago. Spiritual teachings that have been either directly or indirectly influenced by the Templar Melchizedeks will have a distinctly patriarchal slant, often promoting gender subservience. Well, yeah, that's for freaking all religions. Ever read the Bible or some of the stuff in the Quran about how they view women? All right, let's keep reading. Elitist philosophy and subjugation of Earth's elemental kingdoms. So let's read that one more time. It says, often promoting gender subservience, elitist philosophy, and subjugation of the Earth's elemental kingdoms. They basically want to control everything. So that's how we got to be where we are today in this world, ran by all these religious cults that control everything through the corporate religious industrial complex, the government, the banking institutions, the financial institutions, the education systems, big pharma, big agriculture, and big tech. Oh, and with the legal system. These attributes of the Templar Melchizedeks were not originally part of the Melchizedek cloister strain, but rather evolved through extraterrestrial distortion. The cloister family Melchizedeks are considered to be the pure strain of this race. The Templar Melchizedeks and their descendants, a mutation of the strain. Oh, that's interesting. So I wonder if that created discrimination. The Templars, because they were always fighting and they were in wars all the time. This is very interesting stuff. It's a lot of detail that, I mean, I've never read this much detail about this stuff in other books. So let's keep reading. In the following pages, we will explore how that distinction came to be, as the duality within the Melchizedek race has created an intense hidden undercurrent, with the ideologies of present-day Earth greatly influencing the development of many of your world religions. And this distinction also directly affects the genetic code and ascension process of descendants of the Melchizedek races. So, I mean, how do you figure out exactly which race we might be? Like, is there like a DNA test you can check and it's going to tell you which, are you the Templar Melchizedeks, or are you part of the original, most purest strain? That'd just be an interesting thing to figure out, if there was like a DNA test or a way to. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I've never really, I don't know how. Maybe it's some kind of DNA test that like measures the frequencies of the DNA or something. Someone's got to have it. Someone's got it somewhere. The Melchizedeks of both Templar and cloister persuasion draw their name from the original genetic affiliation with the Turanusium I subrace, Melchizedeks from Terra, whose name also denoted their genetic affiliation with the entity Gestalt Melchizedek from the realities beyond the metagalactic core. There are many divergent races bearing traces of the Melchizedek line throughout all of the harmonic universes. Members of the priesthood of Melchizedek who specialize in dimensional ascension training are not necessarily direct members of the Melchizedek race line, but often work under the teaching programs of that cloister. So, I mean, if this is true, then all the stuff about like ascension and like going to heaven, it's just talking about activating DNA strands and becoming like a higher consciousness being. But like it appears like the corporate religious industrial complex did is they grabbed a hold of this narrative and then twisted it into their fear-based Hegelian dialectic of, obey us as God, or we're going to send you to hell and we're not going to send you to heaven. It's basically saying you're not, it's basically just a watered down version of saying obey us and do what we say, or else we're going to send you to hell and you're not going to activate your 12-strand DNA and evolve to a higher level of consciousness. But this has got to be where it all comes from. The Hegelian dialectic of heaven and hell and all that stuff. During the third seeding about 65,000 years ago, the Melchizedeks appeared in Atlantean culture, and prior to the sinking of the Atlantean islands, 30,000 to 11,500 years ago. Okay, yeah, that was the biblical flood of 11,500 years ago. This is when Atlantis sunk. It had retreated to the underground haven deep below the Earth's crust within a three-dimensional frequency modulation zone that exists between Earth and her anti-particle double. This area is known as the Inner Earth, and large civilizations exist in these lands since times prior to Atlantis, when the Melchizedeks and others began to retreat from surface life. These underground civilizations exist to this day, and occasionally members interact with surface Earth through the hidden caverns that link Earth's surface to the modulation zone of the Inner Earth. I wonder if Mount Shasta in California is said where a lot of these tunnels lead to the Inner Earth, and there's the underground cities of the Lumerians and stuff. There's a lot of folklore around Mount Shasta being like the portal to these, and the passageway to these Inner Earth cities, these inner civilizations that might be existing on a different frequency bandwidth, but like that's where it all is. That's why there's so much paranormal activity and there's so much folklore, and it's such a high vibrational place And, that's where people go to do all the spiritual retreats and the UFO sightings and all kinds of folklore and things about people disappearing and seeing beings and going into caves and all kinds of crazy stuff. Both cloister family Melchizedeks and Templar Melchizedeks reside within these lands under the primary guardianship of the speakers of the Blue Flame and Melchizedek priesthood and priesthoods of Ur and Mu from Terra. These subterranean lands were originally called Aratoth, later Argatoth, and since about 3,000 years ago have been referred to as Agartha. Some of you might have heard Agartha before. That's just referring to like the inner earth, all the underground civilizations. I've heard that term get thrown around a whole bunch of times when people were talking about the Atlantis and Lemuria and where they all went after the Great Flood, and how Mount Shasta is like one of the portals and all kinds of crazy stuff. Mount Shasta is definitely a place to visit, by the way. We went and walked around there one time and stayed the night. It's definitely a very unique vibrational energy to it. Like, you'll feel it when you get in there. It's the energy there is much different than a lot of other cities you'll visit. The cloister family of Melchizedeks, Templar Melchizedeks, the staff of Amente, the speakers of the Blue Flame, and the Templar and Axion seals, the Eye of Elohim, and the 666 symbolism, 10 million through 3,500 years ago. As we have mentioned, the first full wave of the Melchizedek's birthing cycle began during the third seeding about 35,000 years ago, the second wave about 3,500 years ago, and the last about 250 years ago, and continues on today. I wonder if this is the same waves that Dolores Cannon talks about in her teachings, because she's always talking about these incarnated souls that are, reincarnating, that are here to evolve, to help humanity evolve out of its lower frequencies, evolve out of all this scarcity living and central banking systems and constant war and propaganda and politics and governments and all this stuff. And she's talking about how there's been 3 waves of what she calls volunteers that are coming to help with the process of evolving to a higher level of consciousness. And I'm pretty sure this is what Dolores Cannon talks about. She calls them the waves of volunteers. During their first appearance, they created the priesthood of Melchizedek on Earth, a spiritual organization specializing in the process of ascension, which over time developed a strong elitist, sexist, patriarchal slant due to the Atlantean and Syrian Anunnaki influence. Yeah, this is where you get into the whole biblical stuff and the God the Father, of course, having to be a man. Which, again, that was all just, propaganda. About 32,000 years ago, some of the Melchizedeks joined forces with the matriarchal Terran priesthood of Mu, creating a more balanced Melchizedek priesthood, which more closely followed the teachings of the equality promoted in the original Melchizedek priesthood. The balanced Melchizedek priesthood became known as the cloistered family of the Melchizedek, for they carried with them the original sacred law of one teachings of the Melchizedek morphogenetic cloister. The egalitarian Melchizedeks became known as the speakers of the Blue Flame about 10,000 years ago, when the priesthood of the Ur and the Peladorian Council of Terra transferred Earth guardianship of the staff of Amente, blue flame, Terra's morphogenetic field out of the hands of the unbalanced patriarchal Melchizedek priesthood and into the hands of the balanced Melchizedek priesthood. The Terran priests of Ur disassociated themselves from the patriarchal Melchizedeks, attributing their elitist, sexist slant to infiltration of the Syrian Anunnaki cultures, who brought with them to Atlania and later Atlantis the distorted teachings of the original Templar solar initiates, whose elitist, aggressive misuse of power for materialistic gain had culminated in the cataclysm of Terra 550 million years ago. This transfer of guardianship of the power of the blue flame 10,000 years ago resulted in the instrumentation of two more genetic frequency seals being placed upon members of the six race Melchizedek cloisters who were associated with the Templar distortions of the sacred law of one, and also on any descendants of the Templar Melchizedeks or races who interbred with them and picked up their genetic coding. And does this make you think a little more about who you decide to have children with? The Templar seal, as the first alteration became known, was implemented 10,000 years ago and presented a six-dimensional seal upon the Hall's sphere of Amente. The second Templar seal was administered about 3,500 years ago, 3,500 years ago, when descendants of Templar-sealed Melchizedeks infiltrated Egyptian culture and violated the covenant of Pallador by opening the Dimension 2 Earth portals as a way of orchestrating ascension through the Dimension 1 and Dimension 2 underworld. Through their misdeeds, many chaotic forces were unleashed upon the earth, and humans with distorted morphogenetic imprints were released from the seals of Pallador and Amente and allowed to pass into Terra. Many tragic events since took place on Terra as a result of this misadventure 3,500 years ago, and the seventh dimensional seal was added to the Templar Melchizedeks who participated in these events. The second Templar seal is called the Templar Axion seal. Both Templar seals made physical ascension through the halls of Amente impossible for those who carried this genetic configuration, and only under certain circumstances could the soul essence pass through the blue flame. Those bearing the Templar Axion seal could eventually pass into Terra and enter incarnations within the six races, but the Templar Axion seal did not allow them to transmute into their immortal seventh race bodies. The Templar Axions were destined to repeat innumerable incarnational cycles upon Earth in order to clean up the mess they had made by releasing the chaotic forces of Dimension 2. So I guess that's where we're still stuck in right now, if I'm not mistaken. Only the Elohim, the Oxyus entity family of Ra confederacy families of the Azurites and Ammonites from the metagalactic core, or the Brino entities from Harmonic Universe 5, had the power to release the Templar Axon seal, and would do so only for humans who gained their favor through serving the truth of the sacred law of one. I think this is talking about like the initiates that were taught how to astral project and do energy healing, and the initiates of the sacred knowledge of the universe. That's where you get into all these secret societies and things like that. The Freemasons, the Templars, et cetera, et cetera. And also the teachings of Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus, which is where Freemasonry even comes from. The Templar Axion seal became as a curse upon the human lineage, as this distortion was passed on genetically as the Melchizedeks and their Hebrew hybrids interbred with other racial strains, the Templar seals were passed on, in whole or in part, to incarnate the souls who did not have this prior affiliation. Fragments of the Templar seals that passed on genetically created a variety of incarnational and ascensional problems for anyone involved with them. The seals were to remain intact for those whose prior affiliations with the Templar solar initiates, Templar Melchizedeks, warranted such security measures, but attempts were made to help purge unintended Templar seal holders of their genetic burden. The Elohim Syrian Council of Harmonic Universe 2 and the Pleiadians all assisted in this plan, offering ascension teachings through which the burdened races could purge their genetic code of the Templar seals. Templar seals can only be removed when this is approved by the Ra Confederacy and its Oxyus, Ammonite, and Azurite Gestalt families, the entities who orchestrated the Templar sealings in order to protect Earth and Terra. The Templar seals still affect a majority of the present human population, and the Elohim, Pleiadians, Syrian Council, and other assistants from the higher harmonic universes still work to assist unintended Templar seal bearers. Through spiritual training, humans are led to at least a rudimentary understanding of the sacred law of one. And once this education has taken hold, the Elohim, or the helpers, take the incarnate through the astral planes if the incarnate's fourth DNA strand is plugged in. Or in parentheses, it says, if the incarnate's fourth DNA strand is plugged in. So the Elohim and the others helpers take the incarnate through the astral planes into a meeting station with the eighth dimension metagalactic core. There, the incarnate's personal morphogenetic field is evaluated to determine if the Templar sealings is in order as a planetary security measure, and if the seals are unwarranted, the Elohim petition the Ra Confederacy to remove any trace of the Templar seals. If the Ra Confederacy agrees, the seals are removed and the incarnate's consciousness is allowed to pass through the eighth dimension where the DNA imprint in the morphogenetic field is repaired. The eighth dimensional meeting place of the passageway into the metagalactic core is often referred to as the Eye of Elohim or the galactic core. Humans not bearing the Templar seal distortion can pass through this dimensional portal once they have fully evolved their seventh DNA strand. Those bearing the Templar seals must be assisted by the Elohim, Azurites, Ammonites, or their many helpers in order to pass through the eighth dimension to heal their DNA of the Templar distortions. Others who rightfully bear the Templar seals can find freedom through working with the lessons of love, unity, and equality, as taught through the sacred law of one. When these lessons are learned, the incarnate's consciousness is no longer a threat to interplanetary security, and assistance in lifting the Templar seals will be provided. Well, that's really interesting. So this is where religion, takes this idea, and then they spun it off like the corporate religious industrial complex. They again presuming that all this is true, which it sounds pretty in alignment and with everything else out there, and this is like another missing puzzle piece. But if all this is true, then that means the corporate religious industrial complex took this knowledge of, activating the DNA strands and the law of one and teaching people, just love and unity. The corporate religious industrial complex took this, spun it off into a fear-based Hegelian dialectic, heaven and hell, do as we say or you're going to hell. But at the same time, they actually do the opposite of the law of one, which is use religion to create division, and then they cause the different religious groups to go to war with each other, claiming your God is fake and my God is real. Therefore, I'm going to put a jihad on you, a holy war, and I'm going to kill you. And that's what we've been living through for like thousands of years on this planet, is a bunch of divided religions that took this knowledge and weaponized it. All right, let's continue reading. Though we will not address the mechanics by which the Templar seals operate, we will provide a bit of information regarding the DNA strands affected. The Templar seals is a 6-dimensional seal affecting the 2nd, 4th, and 5th DNA strands. The 6th base tone of strand 2, the 6th overtone of strand 4, and the 12th overtone of strand 5 were all removed from the morphogenetic field of the Templar Melchizedek cloister. The portion of the Melchizedek cloister morphogenetic field containing the seal was removed from the sphere of Amente and placed within the planet core. What does it say? It says core Alcyone? Core Alcyone. I'm not sure what Alcyone. Let's keep reading. Okay, so the core Alcyone within the Pleiadian star system, which required the seal bearer to evolve with the Pleiadian star system for a time as pure consciousness before being able to ascend through the sphere of Amente to rebirth with the 6th race on Terra. The 4-strand distortion of this seal created a polarization within the 4th heart chakra, which corresponds to the 4th dimensional frequencies with the barrier within the nadial capsule that separates the mental and astral awareness and separates the 3rd mental body and 4th astral body levels within the auric field. It limited astral travel to the lower astral planes. It created a separation within the astral awareness, creating a lower and higher astral identity. The lower astral identity became known as the evil twin, or the dweller on the threshold, within some religious teachings. The 2nd strand distortion created a division within the dimensional 2 elemental emotional body, which created 2 levels of the subconscious mind, a higher level and a lower level. The higher level held identity fragments of subpersonalities, while the lower level created a chaotic emotional force that came to be known as the shadow self, exaggerating the human's primitive emotional impulses. The 2nd strand distortion also made it impossible for these humans to successfully interbreed with other species from Earth or from the stars. It created an amplified blockage between the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd chakras, blocking out clear communication with the body consciousness and with the Earth's elemental kingdoms. Let's read that again. It said it created an amplified blockage between the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd chakras, blocking out clear communication with the body consciousness and with the Earth elemental kingdoms. You know what is not blocked from Earth's elemental kingdoms and communicating with it is animals. Like, the animals don't have these blockages, because if you look at the way that the birds react right before there's an earthquake, the birds know before an earthquake is about to happen because they are able to communicate with the Earth's elemental kingdoms. That's why all the birds fly out of the trees before an earthquake happens. Well, how do the birds know that an earthquake is about to happen before it even happens? Because they're connected and able to communicate with the Earth's elemental kingdoms because their DNA hasn't been screwed up. The fifth strand distortion made the physical earthly body unable to transmute or ascend. So the consciousness would have to rebirth into the 6 races on Terra to continue evolving. So this is the incarnation cycles. So you ever hear people say, "Oh, you're just stuck in a bunch of incarnational cycles and you're just reincarnating and you're stuck in this loop." Well, so if that's true, then this is like the mechanics. This is the mechanics of how the incarnational cycles are happening and why they're happening and why people are stuck in them. The Templar Axion seal did all of this and more. It is the 7th dimensional seal, which meant that once the consciousness had managed to ascend to Terra, it could not evolve into the 7th races, reclaim the immortal body, and descend out of matter form. The Axion seal required that the soul continue innumerable cycles of birth and rebirth within the earlier races until the time when Terra and Earth would emerge. The 6th base tone of the first strand, 6th base tone of the 5th strand, and 6th base tone of the 6th strand of DNA were all removed from the morphogenetic field. This genetic configuration of the Templar Axion seal was the original meaning behind the symbolism of the 666, and these numbers also figured prominently in the earlier building of the Great Pyramid, for this seal had originally been applied to the Syrian Anunnaki in Harmonic Universe 2, who assisted in the construction of this machine. So yeah, the pyramid it says it's a machine. I've always theorized it was like a massive, highly advanced computer machine that had multiple applications, like a communication device, put your consciousness into the freaking halls of Amente, to astral travel, free energy device, wireless energy device, healing device, resonance chambers. The 666 became the trademark of the members of the Syrian Anunnaki who refused to accept leadership from the Harmonic Universe 2 Syrian Council and who would not uphold the Law of One. The 666 became a part of the human genetic code through the interbreeding of the Melchizedek's cloister with visiting Anunnaki, who created the hybrid races, the Nephilim and Anu. And then again, through the imposition of the Templar Axion seal following the operation of the Dimensional two portals in Egypt during the 3rd seeding, to administer the Templar Axion seal, part of the morphogenetic field was put under the jurisdiction of the Arcturian races, in part with a planet in the Andromeda Galaxy, which meant that the soul essence would have to evolve a disembodied consciousness first through a disembodied consciousness first through the Pleiadian system, then Arcturus, and then into Andromeda before it could finally rebirth on Terra. Once its Terran cycle was completed, the soul had to return to Earth by passing the consciousness through these other star systems, passing the consciousness through these other star systems. Teachings of the Law of One could slowly heal the identity until eventually its tour of duty on Earth would be fulfilled. This tour would last until Earth had successfully re-evolved into Terra and the covenant of Pallador was fulfilled. All right, let's keep reading. Due to the Templar and Templar Axion seals, the concept of soul harvesting became part of many religious teachings. Soul harvesting referred to souls bearing the Templar seals being brought by one of the helper organizations before the Raw Confederacy for review, at which time those souls deemed safe for transit to Terra or higher systems would be released from the Templar seals and allowed to end the perpetual cycles of birth and death on Earth. Those passing the review would have evolved to comprehension of the necessity for the law of one and would have actively employed these principles within their present incarnation. Passing the review meant the soul would be harvested or cleared of its distortions and allowed to ascend to Terra and allowed to ascend to Terra for rebirth within the 6th and 7th races, and following its completed Terran cycles, the soul could ascend out of matter. In some traditions, this concept became translated as Judgment Day, or similar ideas of having to pass God's tests, in parentheses, or become worthy. But in truth, God's universe is free, and these concepts applied only to the beings bearing the Templar seals, who wore the armor of the disregarded, or who wore the armor of their disregard for the law of one within the configurations of the genetic codes. Processes of initiation that developed through the mystery schools of old and those of the present were all designed to assist in the ascension passage. Many were designed specifically to release the Templar seals and to protect individuals from inadvertently adopting the seals through interbreeding. It is very interesting. I guess that's why bloodlines and DNA and genealogy has always been such a high priority. I mean, one of the highest priorities when you read the Bible, especially the Book of Mormon. I mean, the Book of Mormon, they don't mess around when it comes to DNA and the genealogy records in the Book of Mormon, and even in Utah. In Utah, there's a giant genealogy vault built into the mountain, like designed to withstand a nuclear bomb, and it's just a massive genealogy record. You can't really visit. It's not open to tourists. It's 24-hour security, like it's on lockdown. But I'm pretty sure they have like the whole lineages of all these alien, everything from present all the way back to all the alien races, the interbreeding, the Nephilim, the Anunnaki. I'm pretty sure they got it all in there. They just don't let people see it. Many people of present-day Earth carry some portion or all of the Templar seals, and they will experience such a review after passing into the astral plane in death. Others can begin this review before death by working with spiritual principles and guardians, ascended masters, who will help them learn the law of one, so the seals can be removed prior to death, which will allow some individuals to transmute the body and pass through the halls of Amente to Terra, immortalizing the body as it was originally intended. Again, this is all it talks about in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, the other book I read on this channel. But I mean, essentially, this is just reiterating the same stuff from the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, but this is just going into like an incredible amount of detail that the Emerald Tablets didn't really go into. The Emerald Tablets were pretty vague compared to how detailed this description is. Okay, let's continue. The enforced tour of duty of some of the Templar seal bearers is almost at its end, as the merger of Earth's grid and Terra will take place within the next 3 to 4 Earth generations, a process that will begin in the year 2012. The Earth will ascend in waves as portions of its energetic systems merge with their doubles and transmute into Terra's grid. The first wave will begin in 2012 and end between 2027 and 2084, i.e., 5 to 6 12-year cycles following the opening of the halls of Amente, which is scheduled for the 2012, it's scheduled for 2012 through 2022. Let's read that again. It says the 5 to 6 year cycles following the opening of the halls of Amente, which was scheduled for 2012 to 2022. Humans who can assemble their full fourth DNA strand will be able to ride this first wave into ascension. How do you know if your fourth strand is activated? You know, I booked a session with the clairvoyant who was talking about all this stuff before I read this book. It was like a year ago, way before I even heard about this book. And she talked about this, the fragmented souls, the DNA strands. I asked her to like remote view like my DNA strands. She said I had 4 of them activated. I can't prove that, but I want to know if there's like some way to test to see like how many DNA strands you got activated. That way you're not guessing. The second planetary ascension wave is not scheduled to occur until about 4230 AD. Templar seal bearers who have their seals released can ascend on this first wave and be freed of the earthly incarnational cycles. I mean, that sounds nice. Do you really want to reincarnate back on this shithole the way it is now, with your financial systems of enslavement and your 9-to-5 jobs and taxes and social securities and federal tax ID numbers and endless wars and propaganda and poisoned food and fluoride in the water and chemtrails in the air and your police states? It would be helpful to humans if they could realize the reality of life after death. So when encountering this event, some level of preparation can be applied. Most humans would prepare for a trip across town, yet they might make little preparation for the greatest journey they will make, the voyage between the dimensions, when they leave the confines of one lifetime and their consciousness moves into its next experience. All humans will have a personal review of their life content upon this transition, but not a judgment placed upon them. Now, that's what I've been saying with the religions, the corporate religions are too complex. They're just you're going to be judged. You better do what we say, or you're going to be judged. I called bullshit on that a long time ago. The religious people didn't like it. But, fuck them. If they're going to go around spreading a bunch of nonsense, people need to call them out. The personal soul and its higher levels of consciousness are aware of the evolutionary process, the purpose of which is ascension. The soul awareness becomes available to a human after the veils created by the confines of the physical genetic code are lifted, and the identity as soul then chooses the next living experience most appropriate to its own evolution, learning, desires, and ascension process. So that means you chose your parents for your ascension process. That means all your childhood traumas and experiences and bad things that happened to you that have traumatized you and created your post-traumatic stress disorder and your emotional triggers. You chose that life for your ascension process according to this book. What do you guys think? Let's continue. Much help is available in the higher dimensions, and there are many institutes of higher learning, but one does not have to die in order to receive this assistance. Education through the astral identity and projection of consciousness is accessible to most humans while they are still alive in the body. And through an integration of the astral identity, which comes through the building of the fourth DNA strand, the comprehension of the soul becomes available to the human on Earth. It is through this level of understanding that an individual can discover if the Templar seals are an issue, and if they are, how best to proceed for their removal. Well, that is, I guess, a good and helpful thing to know if you're trying to ascend into the higher dimensions, is that, let's read that again. It is through this level of understanding that an individual can discover if their Templar seals are an issue. And I guess it says up here too, education through the astral identity and projection of consciousness is accessible to most humans while they're still alive in a body, and through the integration of the astral identity, which comes through building of the fourth DNA. The comprehension of the soul becomes available to the human on Earth. So according to this, like if you understand and comprehend the soul and dimensions and astral travel and all that, if you can, have the, what's the word I'm looking for? The competence to grasp this stuff, then your fourth DNA strand should be activated. I just see so many like hardcore born again Christians that do not comprehend this right here. Like their fourth DNA strand is not activated because they absolutely do not comprehend any of this stuff. They lack the understanding of vibrations and frequencies and science and physics and consciousness and the pineal gland. They have no freaking clue, but they think they're so righteous. The issue of the Templar seals and of the dimensional frequency patterns held within the imprint for the DNA will have to be addressed either in life or after death transition. For it is the frequency patterns held there within that for it is the frequency patterns held there within that will determine the dimensional bands within which consciousness will manifest or will next manifest. It is not a judgment call by some authority figure that determines where you will next travel after your present lifetime, but rather an energetic compatibility between the frequency bands held within the pattern of your consciousness and those within the multidimensional universe. DNA is built upon minute electrotonal patterns of multidimensional frequency, and the energetic imprint of the DNA goes with you in the death transition. The content of that electrotonal pattern will determine how high your consciousness will be able to travel once it is released from the body. The DNA can be directly affected in life by working to bring higher frequency, higher dimensional energies into the operating DNA strands through using the chakra system effectively, and the work that is done to increase the electrotonal patterns during life will directly affect the experiences available to you following the physical death. For some of you, immortalization of the body and passage through interdimensional portals will be possible, but only if you can learn some of the mechanics by which these events take place. For it is this reason that we have provided you with this information. You will go on a voyage when your soul awareness brings this lifetime to a close, with or without your body, whether or not you are prepared. This is the way of life within the universe. As with any journey, preparation can make the trip much more enjoyable. Most of you would not journey to a distant land without a map in hand, and so we offer you a rudimentary trial guide for the journey of consciousness with which you are presently involved. There is an order, purpose, plan, and meaning for your personal evolution and your existence, and it is intimately intertwined with the evolution of your planet and that of your species. Now, we will offer a bit of information as to where your journey will next lead. Science of Ascension, the Fifth World, the Seventh Race Cycle, and Waves of Ascension beyond 2000 AD. And let's see how long this section is really quick. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop the video now because we've been over an hour reading, and we're gonna let's continue this part in another upload.